Welcome to a deep dive into Robert Greene, the guy who wrote all those books about power and strategy and human nature.
Oh, absolutely. His work is fascinating.
Yeah, and you shared this interview with him by Michaela Peterson.
Yeah, it's a good one. Really gets into like the nuances of human relationships.
It does, it does. And
Yeah.
one of the things that struck me, and I think you mentioned it too, is just how, like, different people's what's going on in their head versus how they act can be.
Oh, totally. Green talks about that, about how we all wear these masks to some extent.
Yeah, it's like we have this public persona and it might not always match up with, what's really going on behind the scenes.
It's like he pulls back the curtain a bit, you know?
Huh.
And it's not about being cynical or anything. It's more about developing what he calls a discerning eye.
A discerning eye. Okay, so like what does that even mean?
Basically, it means learning to like recognize the patterns in people's behavior. So like let's say someone is constantly breaking promises or they're always late. It's not just a random thing. It might be like a red flag, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it could point to something deeper, some underlying pattern that's worth paying attention to.
So it's kind of like that story Green tells about when he first started working. He had this idea that everyone was driven by like ideas and getting results.
Yeah, and then bam, reality hits you in the face.
Exactly. He quickly realized that office politics, that was a whole other ball game.
Oh yeah. It's easy to get caught up in your own expectations and miss what's really going on.
That's where like trusting your gut comes in, right?
Exactly. Like Green talks about this a lot. He doesn't want us to ignore those red flags, those gut feelings that something's off.
That's interesting because sometimes I feel like we're told to, not be so suspicious or cynical.
Right. But it's not about that. It's about finding that balance. You could be open and optimistic,
Yeah.
but you also got to be aware, right?
So we're not supposed to like become cynical and distrusting of everyone.
No, not at all. It's about, just being a little more aware, a little more discerning. Think of it as healthy skepticism.
Okay, I like that. Healthy skepticism.
Yeah, it's about navigating relationships with like a little more insight and wisdom.
So how do we get better at this? Do we need to like study micro expressions or something?
Well, Green talks a lot about nonverbal communication, and he's particularly interested in the eyes.
The eyes, huh?
Yeah, he sees them as like a window into someone's true emotions. Like, have you ever walked into a room and you could just sense the tension even though nobody had said a word?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's your intuition
Hmm.
picking up on those nonverbal cues. Green doesn't see it as some mystical thing. He's saying it's primal, like we've been communicating nonverbally since before we even had language.
It makes sense when you think about it like that.
Right. And he points out these specific tells that can like reveal hidden emotions, especially when it comes to, um, manipulation. For example, he says that when people are genuinely excited or interested, their pupils tend to dilate.
No way, really. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's like our eyes literally whiten when we're engaged.
So does that mean if someone's pupils aren't dilated, they're not being sincere?
It's not always that simple,
Yeah.
but it can be a red flag, especially when it's combined with other nonverbal cues.
Okay, so what else should we be looking for?
Green talks about this thing he calls the dead or lizard-like stare, where someone might say all the right things, but their eyes just seem cold and unengaged.
Ooh, I know exactly what you mean. It's like their smile doesn't reach their eyes or something.
Right. There's this weird disconnect between their words and their nonverbal communication, and it can be really unsettling.
Totally. So we're talking about paying attention to all these little details, these inconsistencies to get a better read on people's true intentions.
Exactly. It's like Green's encouraging us to channel our inner Sherlock Holmes.
I love that. Be our own detectives in a way.
Precisely.
But then it makes you wonder, right? Like if everyone's wearing these masks and trying to, I don't know, present a certain image, where does authenticity fit into all of this?
That's such a great question, and it leads perfectly into this concept of strategic authenticity, which we're going to dive into next.
Strategic authenticity. Okay, so that sounds kind of like a contradiction, right? Like, are we being authentic or are we being strategic?
It does seem a little paradoxical,
Yeah.
but it really comes down to self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like we were just talking about how important it is to observe others.
Right.
Well, it's just as crucial to understand ourselves, like our own motivations and how we come across to other people.
So you're saying we've all got these masks to some extent,
Yeah, for sure.
and strategic authenticity is about being, what, more conscious of that?
Exactly. It's about being aware of the image that we're projecting in different situations. Because, let's face it, we probably don't act the same way around our best friends as we do in a job interview,
Yeah, no kidding.
right? So it's not about being fake or pretending to be someone we're not.
Hmm.
It's more about, like, recognizing that different scenarios call for different versions of ourselves.
Okay, so how do we do that without, losing ourselves in the process?
That's the key, right? Like,
Hmm.
Greene's not saying we should just put on an act.
Right.
He's saying we need to be authentic to ourselves while also, being mindful of the context and how we're coming across.
It's about finding the right approach for each situation.
Exactly. And it comes back to self-awareness, like understanding our strengths and weaknesses, our tendencies, all of that.
So give me an example of what this looks like in practice.
Sure. So Greene talks a lot about the importance of speaking less and observing more, especially in professional settings.
Oh yeah, I've had that advice before.
Right. And it's easy to think of it as like a manipulative tactic, like you're trying to get something from someone.
Sure.
But Greene doesn't see it that way. He sees it as a form of self-mastery. It's about controlling your own behavior,
Yeah.
not trying to control other people.
Interesting. So it's more about being strategic with our own actions than trying to outsmart other people.
Right. Because when you really think about it, when you talk less and you listen more, you actually gain a lot more information. You get to observe people's reactions. You pick up on those nonverbal cues we were talking about.
And that helps you navigate the situation more effectively.
Exactly.
So where do we draw the line? Like when does this strategic self-presentation, when does it cross the line into manipulation?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something you actually ask Greene directly.
I did, yeah. It's like some of the stuff he talks about in the 48 Laws of Power, it can sound kind of ruthless if you're not careful.
Oh, totally.
So I was curious to get his take on it.
And what'd he say?
Well, he basically said it comes down to intention.
Intention, okay.
Yeah, like it's not just about what you do, it's about why you're doing it. He actually gave this example from his own life. He was talking about how when he first met his wife, he would kind of play up his attractiveness by surrounding himself with other women.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's bold.
Right. Some people might hear that and be like, that's manipulation.
Yeah, for sure.
But he was very clear that, his intentions were good.
So it wasn't about trying to make her jealous or, play games.
No, he was just I don't know, trying to create a little spark, a little intrigue. And he knew it was all in good fun.
It's about being playful, but not at someone else's expense.
Exactly.
So it's all about finding that balance again, right?
Yeah.
Like we can be strategic and intentional with our actions
Mhm.
without being manipulative or hurtful.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme here.
Right. It all comes back to self-awareness and being mindful of our impact on others.
This is making me think about authenticity again, Like if we're always adjusting our behavior for different situations, for different people, are we at risk of losing ourselves? Is it possible to be too strategic?
That's a really good question. And it actually leads perfectly into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is Greene's concept of fearlessness.
Fearlessness.
Yeah, and specifically how it relates to 50 Cent.
Okay, now you've got my attention. 50 Cent, as in the rapper.
The one and only.
What does Robert Greene, the master strategist, have to do with 50 Cent?
Well, they actually wrote a book together called The 50th Law.
Wait, seriously, 50 Cent and Robert Greene collaborated on a book? That's incredible. I had no idea.
It's funny you should mention his music because Greene actually points to a specific event, a leaked track, as like a prime example of 50 Cent's fearlessness.
Oh, right. He did talk about that. It's like the worst thing that could happen to a musician, right? Having your work out there before it's ready.
Totally. And this wasn't just like a little leak. It was everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And everyone around him was freaking out. But 50 Cent was just calm.
Really?
Yeah, and instead of trying to like contain the damage, he did something completely unexpected.
Okay, now I gotta know. What do you even do in that situation?
He leaned into it like full on, staged this whole angry outburst for the cameras, smashing a TV, throwing a phone, the whole 9 yards.
He didn't.
Oh, he did. And then he released the footage himself, put it out on social media.
So he basically turned a PR nightmare into this viral marketing campaign?
Exactly. Genius,
Yes.
right?
Total genius.
The leaked track got even more attention because of it, and 50 Cent came off as like this authentic, raw artist.
That's incredible. It just shows you he could think on his feet, adapt to anything.
Exactly. And Greene connects that back to fearlessness.
Okay, but it's not like reckless, jump out of a plane fearlessness.
No, not at all. It's more about having the courage to face those unexpected challenges, to be able to adapt and even find opportunity in those moments of chaos.
So how do we cultivate that kind of fearlessness in our own lives?
Well, Greene says it starts by really looking at our relationship with fear. Like, what are we truly